Welcome to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. It's such a pleasure today to be here with Jim Rainey, enterprise reporter for the LA Times. He's been on a team that has won 3 Pulitzer Prizes and has talked about and written about so many of the largest stories in California and the country, the last several decades. And so I love talking to journalists. This is going to be one of my favorite conversations. Jim Rainey, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm really good. Coming to you here from beautiful South Pasadena, California. Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on. We must be crazy, right? I also like talking to journalists. And we all know that journalists are the root of all evil in our country, right? I mean, there must be something wrong with us that we like each other. So anyway.
Yeah. None of us know how to just tell the truth and the facts, so.
Exactly. We're just all bent on the destruction of the U.S. and the world. But anyway, here we are. So we can't help ourselves. Right?
Well, Jim, I have read your byline over the years quite a bit, and we had the opportunity to meet last week, and we met because sort of the news of last week and going to be newsworthy going forward as we all try to figure out what's next was the filing of bankruptcy by Ampersand Publishing, LLC, the parent company of the Santa Barbara NewsPress. And you have been covering the NewsPress for decades, starting with what's known as the meltdown. And you were here last week and you were reporting on all of this. And so I want to start off right away on that topic. I just want to ask you, what are your thoughts on the demise of the Santa Barbara NewsPress as a journalistic institution? And then if you could just talk a little bit about what it was like to report that story. And you had this big LA Times on Sunday.
Yeah. And if people, just to put a little plug in, anybody up there still gets the print LA Times, the story's in print today on Monday. So Monday. Yeah. So it was online much earlier. I mean, I'm really saddened by what's happened to the news press, and it's both like an echo and reflection of things that have been happening, obviously, in the wider newspaper industry, where we've had this secular meltdown that's been going on, for about the length of time that Wendy McKeown owned the news press, for roughly since 2000, even into the 90s. The advertising market was getting rough on legacy newspapers. But the news press, I mean, I think everyone agrees, was a special case. And there was an especially toxic and unfortunate relationship between Wendy McKeown, many of her staffers over the years, and then many people in the community who just grew fed up with, we all know Santa Barbara's mostly politically a liberal town and a liberal county, although like every liberal place in America, it has big pockets of conservatism, even as we do here in LA. So I'm no doubt there are some people in Santa Barbara who are saddened by the loss of Wendy McKeown's voice, her conservative, her libertarian voice. I have to say, I didn't find those people when I came up there last week, and I talked to a lot of journalists. I did a lot of, Vox Populi, a lot of man on the street, woman on the street interviews. And I honestly didn't get anyone saying, oh my gosh, we're going to miss that conservative voice and that kind of, off the wall voice that the news press could sometimes be. So I was, personally saddened by it because I'm a news person. I love newspapers. Obviously, our future is all online, as you know, from being at Newshawk. And so on that level, I think it was sad. I think, unfortunately, too, I feel really badly for the handful of folks who still work there. And frankly, for past employees who we know there's a National Labor Relations Board finding against Wendy McKeown. I found out from the NLRB that the amount she owes, or her company owes, to be more precise, is now up to $3.4 million. I think this bankruptcy is a clear indication she and her company have no intention of paying that money. And then the folks who left, I don't know if there's going to be any money for them, who just were let go last week. And I really particularly feel badly for those people. It's hard enough to lose a job, but if you don't get money that you're entitled to, that can be difficult. And it appears some of these folks aren't going to get paid. So, I mean, there's a lot of different aspects of this I could go into, but that's kind of my overall reaction is just, yeah, I'm saddened. And I just think it's unfortunate. Even you being at NewsHawk, I think you agree, the folks at The Independent agree that it's better when you have more reporters, more boots on the ground, as they say, because these are people who are out there looking at public records, going to meetings, going to the courtroom and finding out what's happening in criminal and civil cases. There's just, yeah, we could go on about how important the press is. It's in the First Amendment, right? So, yeah, that's, I don't want to go on forever. But in summary, yeah, I'm very saddened that the news press is no more, because I think if you have an outlet, there's always the potential it can do good. Arguably, a lot of folks don't think the news press was doing a lot of good in recent years, but still there was the potential there as long as it existed, or perhaps if it could have been sold, which looks like it's not happening, that you'd get a new owner and maybe a new injection of energy. And now it looks like that's just not going to happen.
Yeah. After the stories came out, I was interviewed by radio and, you and others, and they kept asking me a question of, what does this mean for journalism in Santa Barbara? And so it's a tough question to answer, because the honest answer is not much, because they weren't doing the kind of journalism that they were doing 15, 20, even 5 years ago, So what's different as far as what's reported on? Not a whole lot. We already have we've already seen the demise, right? And so it's a tough thing. On the other hand, what is missing is, this great name, right? This downtown building, this paper that used to be the center of the community. And you covered it back in 2006 when Jerry Roberts resigned and the others resigned on that July 6th day.
Yeah.
So let me just ask you the question, okay? And you reported on that, right? So I know it's always best to have another outlet, but from your reporting and talking to journalists and talking to people and your observation of this community, right? What does it mean to say that we don't have the Santa Barbara News Press itself anymore in this community for people who just don't care about history, who cares, they don't whatever, that was so long to them. They just want to know about their community. What does it mean?
Well, what it means, I mean, I think you're exactly right, what you referenced before. I think it was so diminished by the time it closed this month that there aren't a lot of people. Maybe there are, and they're free to reach out to me and to you, those who were honestly going to miss some aspect of what the news press was reduced to. I think your audience probably knows it was online only, and even the online edition was very paltry. And so in that sense, not a lot is missed. But what is in the larger sense missed, I think, is just, again, that we need more reporters, not fewer, in a democracy. I think that whether you're left, right, center politically in orientation, I think most people would agree that more information, if it's at least rendered with goodwill and people out there honestly trying to get to their version of the truth, I think more is always better. And with the demise of the news press, it was a slow burn, right? But maybe you could have had the funeral 5 years ago, but it means that there are, I think what I said in my story, and nobody is refuted, there are fewer journalists in Santa Barbara now than there were at the peak of the news press. And somehow what would be a really good thing for Santa Barbara, and thankfully, frankly, for Los Angeles, for every other community in America, is to find a way to fund journalism. It doesn't have to be in print. In fact, print, we all know, is just very hard to make it pay, but to make it make money. But we need to find a way, whether it's through the public kind of radio model of nonprofit and kind of subscription-based, foundation-supported, or, for-profit places like The Independent, like NewsHawk. I think the hope of your owners at NewsHawk, no doubt, and the folks at The Independent is, okay, well, now there already was a gap because of the retreat of the NewsPress, but now it's more obvious. Are there things we can do to fill in the void? Maybe some of those folks who still somehow held on to the NewsPress are going to look to us more as readers. They do have their archive, incredibly valuable thing to the community, the archive of the NewsPress. They have their presses too. You folks at NewsHawk don't need them, but The Independent, theoretically, could they get a deal? I don't know that Wendy McKeown wants to sell her presses to The Independent, which just dubbed her the concrete blonde. But there are assets there, and there is perhaps an opening in the public consciousness to become even more aware now. Hey, this thing we call journalism is kind of slipping away. And if we didn't notice before, this is a dramatic event, even though totally agree with what you said before, that the institution itself was so diminished that practically speaking right now today, it's not like there are stories missing in all likelihood because the NewsPress went away. But hopefully there's an opportunity for maybe even a new entity. I think it's more likely that NewsHawk, The Independent, Ed Hat, the folks that are already operating in the community, hopefully step up and do even more. Maybe, there's going to be money available, believe it or not, folks who don't know it, through the state of California. They're going to be funding some journalism fellows to go into communities that are underreported, and maybe one or two reporting positions could be funded through that California state initiative. So I'm just throwing a lot of stuff out here that, trying to be glass half full. Maybe this is an opportunity to expand news coverage in Santa Barbara.
Yeah, great. Yeah, really, really good analysis. Let's step away from the NewsPress and Santa Barbara and talk about the industry.
Yeah.
So one of my side gigs, a lot of us veteran journalists, we teach part-time at journalism at various places. And one of my side gigs is teaching journalism at Santa Barbara City College, Cal State Northridge. And I want to talk about the future. Okay. So we know that journalism is changing, has been changing. We know that advertising revenue has been declining. All newspapers are shrinking. One of the things that I've noticed very dramatically in sort of like the last 5 years is that a lot of young people want to be journalists, but that kind of idea of what a journalist is has changed. It's not the watchdog, city hall, government investigative journalist anymore. And I have to tell you, it's very rare for me to meet someone who's in journalism school at the places that I'm at who wants to do that. They want to be a sports reporter, right? Maybe they want to get into TV. A lot of them are into public relations. And a lot of my colleagues and peers, including those who I worked with at the NewsPress, went into PR because you can often make more money in PR. And so one of the challenges that I see, and I want your sort of talk a little bit about this, is how do we maintain and elevate the stature of what journalists do in a country and in a nation that is increasingly polarized politically, where you had a president for 4 years and, still he's not president anymore, just constantly berating the power of the press and the importance of the institution. Yeah. How do we keep journalism in the eyes of the community as being truth tellers and, important and fundamental to our democracy? And what do you think? How do we do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge, huge challenge for us because you're right. And it's kind of unfortunately, led by the former president, but not, let's be honest, this has been out in the ether, out in the population for decades. Our lead political reporter at the LA Times, Mark Barabak, told a story about being at a Republican convention in the 1980s, the George Bush the Elder convention. I think it was in New Orleans. And the entire arena of, I think close to 20,000 people at some point, urged on by, I forget who the speaker was, turned on the little group of reporters there, maybe 50 reporters, wagging their fingers and shouting, "Tell the truth, tell the truth." So people have been fed this line that people are lying and that it's terrible. So to answer your question, first of all, I think what the kind of thing you're doing right here, and your audience, they wouldn't be watching if they didn't already think this, but my experience in coming up to Santa Barbara reporting this story was everybody loves Josh Molina. Josh is just very well respected in the community. So everybody who's watching this, if you don't already know and you already do, it's really value the journalists you have. But I think we have to earn that too, and I think you've earned it in a lot of ways. I try to earn it by just being straight up with people and just telling them things like, for instance, don't pretend journalists aren't culturally liberal. Like I acknowledge all the time to people that, in terms of the social issues, things like abortion rights, there are more people in most newsrooms like ours who are pro-abortion rights than are anti-abortion. It's just a fact. So don't try to be truthful. And then when you deal with people on stories, try to be really transparent about what's happening. I think it's up to us individually. And then we do have to tell our stories, like things like you're doing here with this podcast. We have to tell, how did we pursue the story? We can talk about that a little bit in a minute on the NewsPress story. I just want to mention for the LA Times, I met, or someone emailed me about my story, and they were politically conservative and they were defending Wendy McKeown. But mainly it was like, you liberal such and such. And I cited 3 stories to them, which were just off the top of my head, that the LA Times has done in the last couple of years. The LA Times did a huge expose on the staff gynecologist at USC, who multiple sexual assaults against young women. If the LA Times doesn't write that story, that doctor, Dr. Tyndall, could still be there sexually assaulting young women. That is not a left or right issue. That is an issue of right and wrong. That's the LA Times. That's the crazy liberal LA Times. In the same way, some great reporting colleagues of mine, Pulitzer Prize winner Harriet Ryan and a guy named Matt Hamilton, have done this series on a top lawyer here in LA, Tom Girardi, huge successful lawyer, making mega $1 million legal victories. And they found out that, he had done some inappropriate behavior and misbilled clients. They basically, and he's married to one of these reality TV starlets too. And they did these amazing stories telling the truth about him. And more importantly, on a societal level, telling how this very powerful multimillionaire had gotten away with it until the LA Times called him on it, while small-time attorneys were getting hammered by the State Bar Association. So I could go on, but I don't want to take up your whole show. But what I'm saying is, the people who criticize us, well, I'm going to do one more quick one. The LA City Council audio tape of the racist and corrupt even comments made by our city council members in LA. By the way, every single one of whom is a Democrat, not a Republican. They're Democrats. They got hammered by my newspaper. And these are all examples. They're not left, right. They're not, you crazy liberals. It's just like, why don't you read what we actually do? And in the case, we could go into the McCaw story on this. It's not left or right. It's like right or wrong. Like it's someone running a news organization the way news organizations tend to be run and to get integrity. And so I just had to get on my high horse for a second, that it infuriates me to hear people belittling what we do, accusing us of being like un-American, or, we're all patriots. We all want the best for our country, for the world. And this idea that, we're back here rubbing our hands together, thinking of ways to ruin America. It's just like so absurd, and it's so, most people should be smart enough to take a breath and go, oh yeah, that's not, these are human beings who are, the Josh Molinas of the world, the Nick Welches of the world, a guy, great voice at the Santa Barbara Independent. I mean, these are valuable, are valuable members of our community. So anyway, I had to get worked up for a second. I just think people are so off base on this. And usually when I talk to them, I try to stay a little calmer than that. And I kind of go through that. They go, oh, well, okay, you seem all right, but the rest of them,
right.
The rest of them are terrible. Your colleagues are crazy. I'm like, they're really not. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate all those comments, and about all journalists, Nick Welch, incredible journalist as well.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because a lot of the conservatives will say things like you just said, like, oh, well, you're different, Josh, or, oh, that story's different, or they must have had to write about that story, as though we're in the back room sort of conspiring. But honest to God, I have never, ever interacted in a newsroom or with, whether locally, San Diego, San Jose, the Bay Area, where any journalists were conspiring in a liberal manner to report news in a way that favors or hurts anyone else. It just does not happen. It's all about right or wrong. Like, is this the thing? Is there conflict? If so, what is the conflict, and how do we explain the conflict? And that's where it starts, regardless of what side the conflict people are on. I think a lot of it has to do with television and, media literacy, and people watch these shows at night and think that's journalism, and they don't understand that journalism starts, you've been up early in the morning, that journalists on the ground talking to their community, that's hard work, So absolutely. I totally agree with you. Well said. So that's part of it too. We look at the LA Times, right? And I love the LA Times. I use it in my classes all the time, from the stories to the visual journalism, and, just, the photography is incredible. But you're like you're one of the greatest papers, in the country, right? You're right up there, New York Times, Washington Post, all that stuff. And so can you talk a little bit about what it's like for you to sort of make it in this industry and survive this long at a time? We've seen the retrenching of the industry. You have an incredible reputation, and we know, how many journalists do you know who are amazing, who got laid off and didn't make it, so can you talk about that? Yeah, well, thank you so much for saying that. I really appreciate it. And I feel like I've been so blessed to get into this business starting in the 1980s, started in the early 80s after I graduated from Berkeley, that crazy liberal institution. I was a sports guy though, right? I was just a dorky sports guy. So I couldn't be that crazy liberal. But no, I feel incredibly fortunate, because at the time I started, quite a bit before you, but you still came in when the business is still kind of humming a little bit. But there was a lot of money in the business. We essentially had, monopolies are cool, right? And we had somewhat of a monopoly on local news. I mean, there was TV and radio, but the interwebs hadn't been invented. And I worked at a little paper after Berkeley up in Contra Costa County, tiny paper, but it allowed me to write about everything. Then I got a break and got to the LA Times at a young age for sort of a glorified internship. Worked at the South Bay Daily Breeze in Torrance. And then most of my career has been at the LA Times. I did leave for a while, about 9 years ago. I went to Variety. I covered the film business. And then I went to NBC News. That's my quick. So no, I feel incredibly fortunate to have been in this business when frankly, print journalism, was just printing money. I mean, the LA Times was once a billion with a B dollar a year revenue business, not profit. The profit, though, I believe was as high as close to 200 million. I think at the peak of the paper. Don't quote me on that figure, but it was a hugely profitable business.
and we had 40 foreign bureaus. I started in an era where we had a full staff of close to 100 in the San Fernando Valley. There are very few papers, standalone papers in the whole country that have 100 journalists anymore. We had close to 100 in Orange County. I could go on, but I feel incredibly fortunate that I was at that thing, and I've been able to ride it out, knock on wood, fairly successfully. As folks, your audience probably knows, unfortunately, the LA Times, just in the last month or so, we've had a round of layoffs, and we lost a lot of really, really talented people, and it was very unfortunate. We still, though, as my buddy Steve Lopez, our star Metro columnist, likes to say, we're still the biggest news outlet, not west of the Mississippi, west of the Potomac. So other than the Washington Post, New York Times, I believe we're number 3. And now they're quite a bit bigger. The New York Times has got more than 2,000 editorial employees. We've got about 500. So yeah, they're in a different game than we are. And the Post has a lot too. So anyway, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I just feel like I was in the kind of golden era and I'm in my 60s. I'd like to do this. Yeah, I love what I'm doing. I'd love to do it for roughly 10 more years anyway. We'll see if the news gods allow that. I don't know if it's going to happen, but just getting to do stories like the one on the NewsPress, I feel like it's a privilege to be able to write about something important like that, something that's meaningful to people, and to, have a few days. I didn't have a ton of time, but I had maybe 4 days, I guess, to work on that story. So that's a lot more, folks like Josh are the real guys keeping the news alive, because, just writing constantly. And yeah, it's hard work. That's the other thing that I wish people would realize is this is not like people just lying around eating bonbons. And like we're grinding it, right, Josh? I mean, this is like you work long out. And I'm not complaining. I love it, but it's tiring work, and we work hard to try and get things right. We really do.
It is incredibly difficult work, and I wish people would understand that it takes time to verify things and find people. You start with nothing at the beginning of the day, and at the end of the day, you have a whole painting, and it takes time to complete that.
Totally.
I want to geek out a little bit with you on your stories, journalism, and so you covered the riots, right? You've covered wildfires. You've covered every major story probably in California. I'm interested. Tell me about your most memorable stories and why, right? Like which of them you're going to be thinking about at the very end, like, wow, I can't believe I did that,
Yeah. Oh my God. It's so hard to pick one. I get asked this. I'm sure you get asked this. One of my most memorable experiences was I'd never gotten to be a reporter overseas, but now quite a while ago, 2006, I went to Iraq for a month and worked out of our bureau in Baghdad, which was, everybody said, well, you're probably in the green zone, because they wanted to think, it's, again, anything to discredit a reporter. Like you probably were. And I want to make clear, even though we were in the red zone, we were in the main city of Baghdad. There was a blast wall around our hotel, which, by the way, a month or two before I got there, some of the insurgents did blow the wall up and blew every window in the hotel out. So it wasn't exactly safe, but I want to make clear I was never I was in Baghdad and some surrounding areas reporting. It was, everything was dangerous over there, but I was never under live fire. A couple of people waved guns at me in a not nice manner. But I spent a month in Baghdad. And the reason that's important is not because I'm particularly brave. I'm not. But because the thing I want to convey about that is that the most rewarding thing about that was meeting the Iraqi people and just hearing about the struggles they've been through in the war and the U.S. occupation. And we had a staff, quite a big staff of translators, reporters, We even had a cook in our bureau. And these were just the greatest people. They were so smart and kind, and they were saying, when I'd go out in the city to do interviews, there were people, believe me, as a blue-eyed, waspy white dude. I grew a beard to try and fit in, and the guys would laugh. My bodyguards would laugh, like, "Oh yeah, you look kind of Kurdish," and then they laugh hysterically. Like there's no freaking way you're gonna pass. But these guys had my back. I mean, we would go out. A couple times I went to the market to buy little just snacks and stuff, and these guys had their guns, and the people, not only the people in the store, but the guy behind the counter did not look like they're happy to see you. So those people were so amazing, and really protected American journalists and risked their own life to do it, because to be helping Americans in that environment was obviously, there was a lot of, some people liked America. There was a lot of hatred of America, though. And they were risking their lives to be seen with us. In fact, one of the things when we went in, we'd go into the green zone to cover press conferences. And one of my translators would always just say, I would often stand in front of him, or we'd position him so he couldn't possibly be on camera, because there are a lot of TV cameras around. Anyway, bringing that one up as a really favorite experience. I also covered a lot of presidential campaigns that I like to talk just quickly. One of my all-time favorites was John McCain's mother, not John McCain, who was an amusing character as well, as are a lot of them. But I ended up kind of striking up this friendship with John McCain's mother, who was a 90, I think when I first met her, she was only 98. And the woman was just a scream. And I got these really funny interviews with her, which became the subject of a couple stories, which got a nice response. She ended up living to 108. And just a glimpse of this woman, she was pulled over driving in Phoenix, I think her Mercedes, going 110 miles an hour. And she was close to 100 years old. So those of you out there who actually kind of liked John McCain, or liked his spirit anyway, he was the son of an admiral, but I'm telling you, the mother, Roberta McCain, what a trip. That woman, and there were bigger, more important people I met, but it's often, I'm sure you experienced this, Josh, it's often like the side character, or the one who's not maybe the center. Her son was the center of what we were doing, but it was so fun to get to meet her, and it kind of felt like we became, like friends. We weren't really friends, but friendly acquaintances. And that was, so yeah, I've got some others, but those are two I'll throw out there that were really highlights for me.
Can you encapsulate what it is about journalism that makes you want to do it? To, you're in your 60s now, you want to do it another 10 years.
Yeah.
Because, as we know, as you get older, you meet other people in their careers, and there's 25-year-olds who are multimillionaires, working sort of in the tech industry, or there's former journalists who've gone into PR who are making 150, 200 grand or something a year, and they're working a lot less than what we have to do as journalists. Can you sort of encapsulate what it is, that fire, that gene, that thing that exists that makes you want to hold on to this as long as you can?
Yeah, totally. I mean, people who have the bug, like you obviously do, like our friend Nick Welch does, Jerry Roberts. I mean, many of the folks who were written about in this. I think what it is, it's just a passion for, frankly, getting to walk in a lot of different worlds. So last week, and I'm going to admit there was like a side thing for me. I'm here in Pasadena, where it's close to 100 degrees. And they're like, yeah, can you run up to Santa Barbara and write about, and I'm like, can I go to Santa Barbara? And like the LA Times will pay for me to go up there and hang out I wasn't quite hanging out because I was scrambling, as Josh knows, but still I'm doing it in this environment where it's a beautiful place. My mom is from Santa Barbara, so it's a place I love. So there's everything from that. And a story that I care a lot about, a community that I care a lot about, Santa Barbara, to the last big story before that was a story that I worked on and off for years on about a former gang member from the east side of LA who was, pretty tough young man and had a lot of bad things, circumstances in his life, and had pulled himself up out of this through Homeboy Industries, which some folks in the audience may know about. Father Greg Boyle here in LA, who's a living a legend in LA. And someone wrote in after my story that he should, we should start working towards his sainthood right now, not wait till he's died. But I got to follow this young gangbanger from Boyle Heights, who, what other 60-something white guy gets to spend time from people from completely different worlds, the Iraqis, presidential candidates, just everyday people you meet, Roberta McCain, and you get to walk in all these different worlds. You get to learn about all sorts of different things that, a lot of other people have really interesting jobs and do important things. But I think the thing about the kind of journalism I've done, and I think Josh has done, is that we've gotten to cover lots and lots of different kinds of things. And I just feel really lucky that that's my experience. At the end of this week, I'm going back to the East Coast with another formerly incarcerated young man who's doing some incredible things. I don't want to, spoiler alert, I don't want to give away the story, but I think it's going to be a really interesting story, and I'm going to follow him around. He's actually going to one of the original prisons in America because he's really into prison reform. So we're going to go to this prison together back in Pennsylvania and do a lot of other, what I think is going to be interesting stuff. So yeah, that's the root of it, I think, is you get to walk in other people's worlds and get to share their stories with the larger world. And like I found, for instance, this NewsPress story, like people have been so appreciative. I've gotten really nice messages. I've got some hate mail too, which is kind of par for the course, right? But that's okay too. I try to respond to those people too, as long as they're not like really over the top nutty. I mean,
are they conservatives, or do they blame the Teamsters for killing the paper? Or what is their criticism?
They appear to be political conservatives who I'm guessing too didn't even really maybe read that much of the story, but it's that binary. Oh, you're a crazy liberal. I've been told the LA Times is filled with crazy liberals, who do the kinds of things I talked about before, like, writing tough stories about Democratic members of our city council. Anyway, yeah, I don't think they particularly tuned into the details of the story. It's just like, well, you're a crazy lib, therefore I'm just going to send you a nasty message. One of the guys, we had a little back and forth, and I listed some of those stories that I just mentioned to you. And he actually ended up, this has happened to me before, by the second or third message he sent me, and I told him, look, I can't get in the debate. He kind of said, okay, well, be cool, good luck. He calmed down, and I think he realized, and that happens often. If you engage people, they kind of see, no, we're not a cardboard cutout. We're actually human. We actually can see there is another side to this. And, in the Wendy McKeown story, there is her side too, which I think that's the great untold side of the story so far, is what motivated this woman over these almost quarter century, right, to own this paper. Like, what was going on with her? What was in her head? I mean, that's a story I know you'd like to tell. I would like to tell. Nick Welch, a lot of other journalists in your town would like to tell. So, yeah.
Yeah, and to be clear, like, every journalist has tried. So, I mean, yes. it isn't as though no one has tried. It's always met with no comment, from either her or representatives. But those are holes in our stories, and we feel bad about those. Those are not things where we're like, let's only talk to these people. It's like, we want all those perspectives, and if we don't get them, regardless of why, we feel bad, and I wish people understand that.
No, Josh and I were talking just before coming on to do this interview, and I said that, I emailed multiple people who are connected in one way or another to Wendy McKeown and said, hey, I'd really like to know the answer. And I gave multiple questions that we were trying to answer. And I believe that most people, when they go into this, I think Ben Bradley, the famous editor of the Washington Post, used to call it the defensive crouch. I think when most people go into the defensive crouch, it doesn't end up serving them well, because there are a lot of other people, in this case in particular, let's be honest. I mean, Wendy McKeown is not a popular figure in Santa Barbara. She probably has a constituency. I have no idea how large it is. I haven't done any public opinion polling, but I tried to reach out. I did reach out to some of those people too, who've written for her, and I just got zero response. So yeah, that's not good. It's better. And somewhere down the road here, I'm thinking somehow she's going to communicate. Like, she can't remain silent forever, can she?
No,
I don't know. We'll see.
Jim, I'm a journalist, so I do need to hit you with at least one hard-hitting question in this podcast. Okay. So, I grew up reading the NewsPress and the LA Times and the sports section, the scoreboard. I can't even tell you how much the hours over the years as a kid and even as an adult you spend just sort of looking at all the data and all the information on the box scores, right?
Yeah.
And recently, the LA Times made the decision to stop doing this. And I heard about that from people I know. Can you talk about, the decision? I know you don't speak for the paper in that regard, but what do you think of that, and what's the reaction that you've gotten from doing that?
Yeah, people are pissed. In short. That's the reaction. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really unfortunate situation that's happened with, or maybe really unfortunate. It's not the best description, but people miss their box scores. They miss, frankly, there are a lot of us who go to the box score first and wanted to, like I'm obsessed with LeBron James's 3-point shooting. Like when he's shooting the three well, which frankly isn't often enough. Yeah. And so I would often go to the Laker box score before reading the story and just go, what did LeBron shoot last night? And especially if they lost, often he had a bad night, but I want to say I love LeBron. Great. We love LeBron here in LA, but stuff like that, or what's Clayton Kershaw's ERA right now? He's out injured right now, but a lot of those things that you can get instantly with a box score. Now you can go online and find this information still, but we all know that those of us who are still print readers too had a ritual with the paper. And often for sports fans, I know multiple, especially older folks, who their first thing was, I like to go to the sports first. I like to go to the box scores first. And so what happened in short was, like all media outlets that I know of, we're trying to save money because we're not in a huge growth industry. And one of the ways to save money, management determined, was to close down our printing operation. We have presses right here in downtown LA that are closed. I assume were sold. I don't know the details of that. But we're now being printed by a contract printer in Riverside, California. And to get the paper printed early enough to get it to people who live as far away, in some cases, as Santa Barbara, you got to print that thing really early, which means really early deadlines. The first story I wrote about the NewsPress, my print deadline was in the afternoon instead of being at 7, 8, 9, even 10 o'clock at night, like maybe it would have been back in the day. And I actually took some, pardon the expression, shit over that story because I didn't have some of the details in there. And I was also trying to get to Santa Barbara. So not to excuse, but to explain to readers, earlier deadlines means less news. The deadlines are so early that most like Dodger or Laker games haven't even started when the paper's being printed. So we can't have in next day results. Now, some folks, I think, would probably say, hey, I'll even take the box score a day late. Like, give it to me a day late. I'd still look at it. I don't know if they're reconsidering any of this. They did already start. They didn't have the TV listings or the schedules for the home, like for the Lakers, Dodgers, Kings, who else? The two football or soccer teams, LAFC and Galaxy. Those are all back in the paper now, which I think was a really good move. Because I know a lot of us old folks, again, we get up, look at the print paper. Oh, the Dodgers are playing tonight, or oh, the Women's World Cup, the U.S. is playing tonight. So it's been partly remedied. It was all, and I don't think it was frankly explained as clearly as it could have been. It really was a production-driven decision. Now, should we have sold the presses and done all that? Like, I'm not gonna get it. I'm not going to get into that. I don't really understand completely the business decision there. I wish we still had all of that stuff in the print edition. They're trying to make the rest of the content good enough that people are still going to want to get it. But obviously we've had cancellations, which is unfortunate because we need all the readers we can get. So hopefully people will hang on and we'll give them enough other good quality content that they'll still get the LA Times. Yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah, it's such a ritual, these little things, right?
Yeah.
And people read, that's the best thing about the newspapers, the physical paper. People read it for all different reasons and purposes. Yep. I know it's not the 1950s where you can here, you take the sports, you take the features, I'll take the news. I know it's not around the kitchen table like that anymore.
Right.
I mean, maybe for some people, but not most. But there's a certain thing you can find for everybody. And of course, online, yes, it's all there, but it's kind of all there. Like everything's there. Yeah. And so it's just like you get lost. And
you can get lost. And people like the whimsy of sometimes they open up, whether in sports or the A section, and they'd be on page 13 and, oh, there's a story that I had never heard of right next door. And I'm going to end up reading about something I never thought of before. So I suppose that can happen online and does happen online too. There's just, obviously there are certain people, the print thing, they're very attached to, and, but it's slowly going away, or not so slowly, it's going away. And so we'll have to see what the world looks like, when a lot of print is going to be gone, because it's obviously, we're well on our way to that. So, yeah.
So we have about 8 minutes here, and I want to wrap up here, 7-8 minutes. Yeah. I'm going to ask you a few questions. I know from our talks off camera, you are involved in journalism education at Berkeley, and I wanted to see if you could just talk a little bit about what that is and why, for any young students who are watching this, not like a recruitment thing, but just why journalism matters, yes, you're not going to make as much money probably, unless you become a big shot like you at the LA Times. Most people don't get those opportunities. But why, why do it? Why does it still matter? Good.
Yeah. I mean, it still matters because, to get on the high horse aspect of it, it's because it's a key part of democracy. It's in the First Amendment. There's a reason, that it's in the First Amendment, because of the importance of a press to a democracy. So there's all those important reasons. But as I was referring to before, it's just a kick in the pants. It's just fun to be a journalist. If you're talking about your student journalist, you get to go to the administration there at, say, Santa Barbara City College and say, hey, what's up with this? Like, why did you change the schedule? Why did you build this new building that wasn't necessary, or that is necessary, and you haven't built a new lab? Whatever it is, you get to question authority, hopefully in a somewhat respectful manner, but you get to get answers to things that are of interest to you and your fellow citizens. And it's just, you feel really engaged and part of the world. And when you're a journalist, I think, and that's the best part of it. And there used to be a thing under Governor Jerry Brown when he was first governor as a young man, and when he didn't want to give raises to state employees, he would tell them that they were getting psychic pay, which undoubtedly some of them were, like, who had really interesting jobs. And, of course, people are saying, well, psychic pay doesn't buy a loaf of bread. But I think, in all honesty, journalists we need to be paid better to pay our bills. I'm fine. Like, I would like a raise, but I'll be okay. But the psychic pay is key. I mean, a lot of us could probably, as you referenced, go into PR or something, but there is a lot of psychic fulfillment, feeling part of the world, feeling energized and engaged, and like you can change things, make a difference, and not necessarily like change a law or something, but maybe just bring some knowledge to someone and connect with people, which is what being human is kind of all about, right? So, yeah, I just find it really, I get emotional talking about it because it's just, because it is so challenged, our business right now. And I feel like, but there's still, I just want to stress to any of your young folks who might be listening to this, there's still going to be the folks who are going to make it. There's still going to be people who are the New York Times isn't going anywhere. Mm-hmm. I don't think the LA Times is going anywhere. The Washington Post, not going anywhere. Even though there are some folks politically, including the former president who keeps talking about the dying New York Times. New York Times is doing just fine. They're making money. They're not going anywhere. And I know that's annoying to those who they report on. But yeah, so those jobs are going to be out there and someone has to fill them. And then there are jobs at places like NewsHawk and the Santa Barbara Independent, which are also hugely important. I don't want to, like, by talking about the big, I don't want to slight local journalists. There's a woman up in Shasta County who I profiled. Her name's Donnie Chamberlain. She's a hero up there covering a lot of crazy political activity, doing it all alone as a blogger. She has a site called the News Cafe, News Cafe. Anyway, so journalism, it's great. And there are heroes doing it. And be a hero.
Yeah.
Keep doing it.
Well, Superman is a journalist, right? So
bingo. Exactly.
And Peter Parker's a photographer, right? So
yeah, there you go.
Last word, you have your big story on the NewsPress in the LA Times today. It's available online. I'll give you the last word before we wrap up. And I just want to say thank you for, this conversation and all the work that you do over the years and decades, and just smart reporting, incredible writing. I appreciate that. I can see how you turn a phrase, a sentence, use a verb, and it's like, wow, that's amazing. So I appreciate all the work you do, but give you the last word here. The end of the NewsPress and your story. What do you want to tell people?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for doing this. And Josh, honestly, I think Josh was kind of like not hesitant, but would you have time to do this? And we don't, as journalists, because we're moving so fast, often we don't stop and talk about what we do. So when I have these opportunities to go to a class or do something like this, I really try to do them because it actually helps remind me of how much I love what I do, how much I value it. And so last word is, because I'm sure your audience is mainly in Santa Barbara, is to folks in Santa Barbara, just support the journalists who were there. Josh, starting with Josh and NewsHawk, but Nick Welch is what a character that guy is. He said, after I wrote my story, I called him irascible. And he said, never been called irascible before. Thanks for that. Thanks for finally getting. That guy is such a character. And really, folks in Santa Barbara appreciate, because it's so easy to take anyone for granted, including like person checking you out at the grocery store. But in particular, journalists, I think, are just kind of like, they're there. They're kind of annoying at times. And but without journalists telling you what's going on at the county, at the city council, in business, in sports, our world's smaller without these people. So that's my thing to your listeners, people watching, is support Josh. Molina, seriously, in any way you can. Take out ads if you're a business person at NewsHawk. Do whatever you can in terms of supporting these institutions, because without the public reading and doing everything they can financially and otherwise to support them, they'll go away, just like the NewsPress went away. And I don't want to live in that world where you're not going to have journalists in journalism. Like, I don't think any of us do, who, when you really think about it, even folks who are down on the media, down on the press, if they really stop to think about it, no, we can't live in that world where we already have a lot of misinformation. That's a whole other topic, right? A lot of disinformation, misinformation. So yeah, let's keep these good institutions like Newshawk, The Independent, Ed Hat, like, let's keep them all going. And that's my last word. Namaste.
All right. Well, Jim Rainey, thank you. Appreciate your time. Good luck to you. Good luck with your story this week. And check out encourage the audience to read your big story in the LA Times today on the NewsPress. So have a great day. Thank you.
Same to you, Josh. Have a good one. Talk to you again.
Thank you. Bye.